What's going on, everyone? This is Nick Juskewycz of Daily Fantasy Winners bringing you another episode of Tee to Green. And in this week's episode, it is the AT&T Byron Nelson. And this is the first of two tournaments in the state of Texas, kind of the second Texas mini swing, if you will. This week it is the Byron Nelson. Next week we have the Colonial, and that feeds right into Dublin, Ohio for Jack's tournament, the Memorial. And that is obviously one of the best tournaments of the year in the PGA Tour that is not a WGC or a major. Then we have kind of a tournament to connect the dots here with the St. Jude Classic in Tennessee that gets us to the U.S. Open at Oakmont. And obviously there are some players over there practicing right now. Ricky Fowler, Smiley Kaufman, and Justin Thomas are definitely documenting their adventures on Snapchat over the last couple of days. That's been fun and entertaining to watch. But I do bring this up just because the next couple tournaments are going to be some weaker fields, so to speak, and that is because we got the Players' Championship out of the way. These next two tournaments, are again Texas swing tournaments. A lot of Texans usually play in these next couple events, but it's a good time, obviously, for players to get in some preparation at Oakmont before the week before the tournament. So with that, where is this golf tournament? It is at TPC Four Seasons Resort in Irving, Texas. It's definitely in the Dallas area. Tips out at 7,166 yards. It is a par 70. It's about an average length for a par 70 golf course. And the winning score here is usually between 10 and 15 under par, which is about average difficulty on the PGA Tour. Some people think it's a little bit on the tougher side. I think it's usually about average or slightly even on the easier side, especially when we get wet conditions like we're going to have this year, because it has been raining in Dallas. It was raining in Dallas on Tuesday. It is raining in Dallas on Wednesday, and it's supposed to on Thursday. So it's going to be a wet track there, and I think it will be a little bit more on the scoreable side this year. What do we need to know about this golf course? I'll tell you what we need to know that's not important, and that is driving accuracy. Driving accuracy here basically is not important at all. It will not hurt you for the most part unless you hit some pretty bad tee shots toward the couple spots where there are penalty strokes. Anyway, so this is usually a little bit of a longer hitter's course. It is not a bomber's course. I've heard a lot of people think that this is a bomber's course. I think more of a bomber's course is a place like Whistling Straits where the PGA Championship was at, where the golf course is a bajillion yards long, and where the shorter hitters are hitting driver hybrids into several of the par fours. That's not what's going to be happening here. But this is a golf course where the longer hitters will generally be doing a little bit better. It'll have a little bit of a positive correlation, only because the longer hitters, obviously being a longer hitter is better than being a shorter hitter, but the longer hitters are a little bit less accurate. But because that's not penalizing, that's why you see the positive correlation there. But there are some shorter hitters and average length hitters that will do well here. Which ones? Usually the ones that are actually just better golfers. It really is kind of that simple when you look at some of the past leaderboards. Zach Johnson did well here very recently. Jason Duffner's a past champion here. And so you will see some. Luke Donald even did actually very well here only a few years ago. I don't think he's in the field this year. But just saying, though, the better shorter to average length hitters will probably still be able to do fairly well here, and I would not rule those people out. I would try instead to try to stay away from the shorter length hitters, maybe even the shorter to average length hitters that are on the cheaper end. I'm talking about $7,000, $6,000, $5,000 level golfers. 8, 9, 10 plus thousand obviously is a little bit more. I can see it definitely rostering those guys and do it very well. And then also, the one thing I'm actually going to draw a little bit of a comparison here before we move on here, and now this is going to sound really strange, so bear with me here for a second, and I obviously know these two golf courses are drastically different in a lot of different ways, but there actually are shockingly some similarities here, especially when we're talking about a DFS approach and making our picks. And the courses I'm going to compare are this one and Augusta National, actually. The reason why is when you are talking about Augusta National, you've got a lot of golf holes with tree-lined fairways, but when you miss the fairway, you really aren't that penalized from a penalty stroke perspective. There are a couple holes you can hit into the woods, and then on 13 you can hit into Rays Creek. But for the most part, if you miss the fairway, you're going to be hitting 2, and you'll have a shot of some sort. And that is pretty much the case here at TPC Four Seasons. You're dealing pretty much with tree-lined fairways, and on the few holes where you can get into trouble, and in this case where there's water on the hole, you usually have a lot of room to work with on the opposite side of the fairway and into the opposite rough. There's a lot of room to miss over there. So this is why driving accuracy isn't that big of a deal at either golf course. And this is why we also see, like even at a place like Augusta, where some of the shorter length hitters or average length hitters can actually do well in when it seems like a bomber's golf course. This is why like Jordan Spieth has done well at the Masters. Zach Johnson is a past Masters winner. Brandt Snedeker's even done well at the Masters a few times. So again, that's kind of the comparison I'm drawing to. I know there are a lot of differences between those two golf courses, but that's just the one comparison I'm making here when we approach this from a DFS perspective. Okay, this is obviously, I know this is a weaker field, so of course you're going to get some random names popping up here that have won, but just throwing it out there. The last three winners of this golf tournament, Stephen Bowditch, Brendan Todd, and Sang-Moon Bae. Obviously not the most biggest household names. And then the three guys before that, Keegan Bradley, Jason Duffner, and Jason Day. This is in the beginning when Jason Day was just bursting onto the scene. Kind of a little bit of a similar situation for Jason Duffner. And then, of course, that's more when Keegan was kind of on his A game, struggling a little bit this year, obviously, but kind of actually like him for this week, but more in that in just a moment. Again, there is supposed to be a lot of rain this week. I will get into a little bit more on this in just a second. There was a lot of rain in last year's tournament. But still, Zach and Jason Duffner both finished in the top 10 last year. So just because there is supposed to be a lot of rain this week, don't think that that's going to be like this huge advantage for Bombers. It might be a slight bonus or a slight boost, but I just don't factor that in too much just from that alone. I just think it's going to make it a little bit more scoreable. It'll be tough for the course to get firm and to dry out and for balls to roll out and that kind of a thing. Okay, so what are we looking at next? We are looking at the par 5s on this golf course. There are only two of them because it is a par 70. Both of these can be eagled. Number 7 is the first one. It is this hole's only given up about 10 to 20 eagles, or it is giving up 10 to 20 eagles. That's actually quite a lot, excuse me. It's going to give up about 10 to 20 eagles, which is quite a lot, and it basically hitters of all distances can pretty much eagle this golf hole. And then number 16, rather, the second par 5, that will only give up about 0 to 10 eagles. Depending on the conditions each year, of how many eagles it'll give up, depending on pin placements and pin positions and all, or pin play positions and weather factors. So that one you might need a little bit more of the longer hitters potentially, but still only 0 to 10. There's not that many to be had. And then number 11 is a drivable par 4 with water down the left-hand side, but again, pending conditions, and the pin really needs to be on the right-hand side of the green or the middle of the green for this to be a realistic eagle chance. You're only going to give about 1 or 2 there. So there aren't that many eagle chances out there. I really wouldn't worry about the eagle factor here from the driving distance perspective in that point. So taking a look right into the statistics, there aren't that many specific stats I'm going to be looking at here this week. They're all pretty generic. Strokes gained, tee to green, proximity to the hole, birdie or better percentage, driving distance, just because, again, like I said, there will be a correlation there, even though some of the shorter hitters can do well there, of more expensive plays in that regard. And then lastly, recent performance. But please, with recent performance, keep in mind that the last few tournaments have not really, those golf courses and those golf tournaments really have nothing to do with what kind of a golf course we're going to see here. The last tournament or two we have seen that's kind of similar in regard to what we're going to see at TPC Four Seasons is Augusta National and the Masters and the Shell Houston Open. Those are kind of the, generally speaking, in a similar regard of what you could find from a course comparison as far as the DFS perspective goes. Last week, obviously, Players Championship, that is a completely different type of a golf course in comparison to what we're going to see this week. That had water all over the place. It was definitely more of a ball strikers golf course, where this is not. It's kind of pretty much polar opposite. So just keep in mind that, yes, recent form is good, but keep in mind recent form, even going back to the Shell Houston Open and the Masters, is really good as well in particular. Kind of keep a balance of both of those. Okay, last thing about weather before we get into the picks. I already mentioned the rain. It rained Tuesday, it's rained Wednesday, and it's supposed to rain Thursday. This means it's going to be soft. But where I'm going to get into this is actually more the wind. The wind is supposed to be fairly low all day Thursday, kind of like 5 to 10 miles an hour all day. Not much of a difference between morning and afternoon. Friday morning is supposed to be very low winds, like 3 to 5 miles per hour, and then Friday afternoon it is supposed to get up more in the 10 to 15 mile an hour range. With a soft golf course and low winds, that means very scoreable. So it makes me think that Thursday afternoon and Friday morning could be a very good tee time wave. Having said that, when we're supposed to have a bunch of rain coming in, not only before the tournament, but during the first day of the tournament, excuse me, we could certainly have tee times pushed back and we could have weather delays. So that could screw it all up. And so basically what I will say is check the weather and make, again, Wednesday night and tune in to DailyFantasyWinners.com to the forum, and we can have a discussion about it and see if there is a tee time wave we should be focusing on, or is the weather going to be too horrific and it's just going to be too unpredictable to make some kind of a prediction in that regard. To the picks. Okay, again, A list here, B list on DailyFantasyWinners.com in the forum, and we can talk about every golfer there as well. Okay, so first pick I am going to make here is Jordan Spieth, and if those of you that follow me think I'm always against Spieth and not picking him, usually that's because he's be on the wrong kind of a golf course, or B, I just think his ownership's going to be too high. This is a perfect golf course fit for him, and it seems like his ownership actually will not be that high because every person I have seemingly have talked to, every tweet that I've seen, and every podcast I've listened to, and everything like that, I'm like his name's being talked about. But the best reaction I'm hearing about Spieth is, yeah, I could see him doing well. Like maybe I'll have like some ownership of him. Like that's kind of the most positive like thing I'm hearing about Jordan, which really shocks me. Again, and I understand most people do think it's kind of a bomber's golf course, which Jordan isn't, but I already made kind of the comparison a little bit from Augusta to here, and I think that could correlate really well for Jordan. Jordan does well in two regards. One, golf courses where driving accuracy is not a big deal, and secondly, where when the conditions are very soft, and that correlates very well here for Jordan because both of those are going to be true here this week. And lastly, and this is kind of there's two other big things here. One, I don't think his ownership will be that high. Now, of course, it's going to be at least 10%, definitely. But most of the time, Spieth is somebody that's like 20% at least, or something like that, like something crazy. I don't think that's going to be the case this week, especially with Dustin Johnson. They're right there behind him, who's only $600 cheaper. The other thing, also, if you just take a look at this on DraftKings, Jordan Spieth's 12,500, Dustin Johnson's 11,900. Take a look at all these golfers. Just take a step back for a minute and look at the golfers that are here in this price range. Charlie Hoffman at 10,800, Matt Kuchar 10,500, Sergio 10,400, Zach Johnson 10,200. Now, just think about the prices that were happening here just in the last couple of months of Daily Fantasy. And now Jordan Spieth at 12,500 also. Sorry, I will get to that in a second. Jordan Spieth at 12,500. He has been about that price all year. He's just been sitting around $12,000 no matter what tournament he's in. So his price has not been changing. But now if you look at Hoffman, Kuchar, Garcia, Zach, all those guys, these are players that have been priced as cheaply as the $7,000 range, and going all the way up to the $9,000 range, or a little bit of the $10,000 range, but mostly the $7,000 and $9,000 range over here, as recently as like a month or two ago. And so obviously this is a cheaper a weaker tournament. So obviously the prices are going to change and their prices are going to go up. But Jordan's has not moved, and so basically what I'm saying is, in majors, when you have like this big of a gap and these players' prices are coming up and Jordan's is not moving, Jordan really is an outstanding play in comparison to the rest. And if Jordan's ownership's not going to be that high, that makes me think he's an outstanding play. And I think the course fit is, again, like I said, absolutely perfect for him. And again, just looking at our odds per dollar here on DailyFantasyWinners.com, if it'll load. Okay, there we go. You'll see right here, Jordan and Dustin are the clear two favorites in Vegas here. And obviously they are more expensive than the other guys, but realistically, their prices should be a lot more in comparison to the Vegas odds. And like I said, Jordan's ownership I don't think will be that bad. So, and there are plenty of golfers that are cheaper that you can use, and even still using some middle price players to go along with Spieth and still make some very good lineups. So Spieth, I would actually be absolutely stunned if he was not at least in like the top 10 this week. I'm certainly he will finish top 5, and he would be my pick to win the tournament this week. For those of you that are worried again about Jordan Spieth missing the cut last week, that was like one of the Players Championship is one of the worst course fits for Jordan. Even though that is not really much of a bomber's course, it is a ball strikers golf course, and Jordan usually doesn't do well on ball strikers type of golf courses because Jordan doesn't find the fairway as often as you might think, and he just generally does struggle on courses where there is a lot of trouble on tighter courses. That's just kind of the general theme there a little bit with him. So, and that's not the case here. So anyways, I like Spieth. So I'm going to talk about Dustin Johnson here, and it looks like Dustin is an outstanding play. The problem is everybody thinks Dustin is an outstanding play. I think Dustin's ownership is going to be off the charts, so this is where I'm going to say fade Dustin Johnson in your GPPs. In cash formats, certainly go for it. But at the same time, I think Dustin is going to be at the absolute minimum 25% owned, and I would not be shocked if he was 35% owned and even as much as 40%. It really wouldn't shock me as much, because I don't see a lot of people, when you look below Dustin, even though there is a drop of $1,100 to Charlie Hoffman, if you look at some of those names, Dustin is clearly better than those guys, especially when you're talking about Dustin, who can rack up the birdies and eagles as well, and he's in great form. He has great course history here. There's basically a lot of reasons going for Dustin here, but the problem is his ownership is just going to be way too high for GPP. So I would go ahead and fade Dustin. He is my one fade this week. Now, moving on to the rest of the picks, I will also actually, let's lastly say before we get on to the rest of my A list, all these guys here, Charlie Hoffman, Matt Kuchar, Sergio, Zach Johnson, all of those guys, I think, are capable of winning the golf tournaments. I would include at least some of them in your GPPs. Maybe not Charlie Hoffman, because I think that price is a little bit absurd, but his ownership could be really low that you might still want to throw him in a little bit. But basically, those guys are going to be on my B list. I can already tell you that, and they're just not my top plays, just because I think Spieth is easily the best play of the most expensive guys. Okay, just want to get that in. Moving on down. Charles Schwartzel at 10,100 and Louis Oosthuizen at 9,900. Two South African players that I think are both definitely underpriced and undervalued a little bit, and I don't think their ownerships will be that high. They're absolutely outstanding tee to green. They are not the greatest driving accuracy guys, generally speaking, and they are golfers that definitely do very well when they can put the drivers in their hands. Again, we have two former major champions here, guys that have won multiple times here on the PGA Tour. Oosthuizen's definitely somebody in particular that I really like. I would say slightly more than Schwartzel, but I definitely like both of them as well, and they're two golfers that can absolutely win this tournament. Brooks Koepka 9,600 is absolutely a perfect fit for this golf course, a bomber as well, and fares well on kind of a little bit of the more open courses as well. Moving on to the $8,000 level golfers. There are four of them in this range that I like. I'll be honest here on this first one. Ryan Palmer at 8,900. I was on the fence a little bit about ownership with him, and I still am to a certain extent. However, I still don't think it'll be insanely high. I think it'll still only be about 15%, and I think I like Ryan Palmer enough that I think if you want to go more than 15% and go with him in GPPs, that's a very good idea, because Ryan Palmer showed up very well in some of the stuff I was doing with FantasyLabs, and he does have the good history here and everything like that. He's a bomber, but he's still not a big household name, and there's some other good names in this price range. I don't think his ownership will be that crazy. And so I think you can go ahead with him in GPPs. Jimmy Walker at 8,800. Don't worry about the last two cuts missed. Again, Jimmy Walker is somebody that would not play well at the Players' Championship. That's like the last place I would ever pick him. He did miss at the Valero Texas Open, which is honestly, that just seems a little bit more of like an anomaly to me, and he's had a very good year otherwise than that, and he is a Texan, but it's not even so much that. It's more just the fact that Jimmy Walker is a terrific course fit for here. Moving on down, Gary Woodland at 8,500. I wish he was playing a little bit better on Sundays over the last couple of years, but he is a very good fit for this course as well, and definitely one of the longer hitters, and can go very low indeed. And moving on down here, Charles Howell at 8,200. Perfect time to jump back on him, because he was getting some pretty stupid ownership there for a little while, and he missed the cut at Wells Fargo, which was perfect timing, and then he obviously missed the cut at the Players' Championship. Two courses where driving accuracy certainly matters more, especially obviously the Players' Championship, and this is a perfect opportunity to jump back on him, because there are definitely some golfers around him that people will be using. Bryson DeChambeau is always a popular name that people like to use. Tony Finau will probably be on my B list, I'm guessing, most likely, and so will Scott Piercy, but basically there's going to be some other guys there that other people will be jumping on. Howell, I think, is a great opportunity to jump back on here after a couple missed cuts, where you can take advantage of some of those people that are looking at recent performance just a little too literally. Okay, so moving on to the 7,000 range, I'm going to give you 5 players in this range. The first one is Keegan Bradley at 7,900. He is a former champion, but more so, he is a perfect fit for this golf course, and this is also a course. Even though I'm putting Jordan Spieth as one of my top picks here, and he is one of the best putters, this is also still a course at the same time where putting isn't a huge big deal. Yes, it can help you if you make a lot of putts, but it's not a course where bad putters usually are don't pay that big of a penalty, so to speak. These aren't the most, they're multi-tiered, but they're not the most difficult greens in the world. Average speed, they're usually not too difficult. And so anyways, Keegan obviously has been struggling with the putter a little bit in particular this year, just because of the ban of the anchored putter. But he's been very good tee to green, and Keegan just quite frankly is too cheap at 7,900. I will still take that, and Keegan's too good of a player still. As I've said, and again, 7,900 is still just a very reasonable price for him. Moving on to my second $7,000 level golfer, Lucas Glover at 7,500. I've been riding him quite a bit here over the last couple of weeks and will continue to do so because he is just that good right now, tee to green, and his putting has actually improved also in particular over the last several weeks. That could be a little bit of just a variance, but at the same time, I really do like what I'm seeing from him, and even so, he's just been very good tee to green. I still think you're getting good value at 7,500 with him. My next pick is Ani Rebound Lahiri at 7,300. Certainly one of the more the bombers, and I think one of the most underpicked guys for GPPs. He seems to always be low owned, and he can definitely really go deep. His big thing, obviously, he hasn't had a top 10 yet this year, but he's had a lot of good finishes, just not the top 10. And the reason is he just can't quite string 4 rounds together. I think it's only a matter of time for him, a younger golfer from India who's definitely got a very bright future, and I think it's coming here very shortly. And this is a perfect opportunity for him to do well, and he definitely does well in the courses where driving accuracy isn't as big of a deal. Speaking of which, golfer, a perfect fit for this golf course. Yes, he is a Texan, or excuse me, he played at University of Texas, not a Texan. Jonathan Vegas at 7,100, very good. He has outstanding upside, just like Lahiri. He does have 3 top 10s this year. And again, just a very good play. And then lastly, at 7,000, somebody who really I just think is underpriced, and this is not because he hit a hole-in-one last week, and it's not because he is a friend of the DFS community. It is Will Wilcox at $7,000. Again, he is somebody I've picked a couple times here as of late, and I know he had a T15 at the Zurich and a T33 at RBC. I know he barely made the cut at, or I shouldn't say he barely made the cut. He made the cut easily, and then he kind of fell off with that one crazy round 3 at the Players with that 82. But again, everybody struggled for the most part with round 3 at the Players. And basically, Will I think, has definitely turned a corner. And it's not just by the what he's talking about in terms of being on podcasts or being on Twitter. It's mostly the statistics are backing it up. He's definitely been better here over the last several weeks. And so I think you're getting good value at $7,000. And FantasyLabs certainly likes him as well with some of the statistics we're going to be taking a look at. And the last 2 golfers in the 6,000 range, Luke List at 6,500 and Kyle Stanley at 6,100. You're getting great value out of those 2 guys, 2 golfers that are bombers that also do very well in courses where driving accuracy is not a big deal. They definitely actually are golfers that I could easily see being in the top 10, believe it or not, by the end of Sunday or whenever the tournament finishes, if the rain pushes it all the way back to Monday. Fingers crossed it does not happen that way. But that is it for this week. I'm going to get to more strategy videos hopefully later on here this week, or at the worst next week. I know you guys seem to like those in particular, so we'll try and get a few more of those out to you as we move closer here to the Memorial, and of course the US Open as well. Thanks again for watching. If you like this video, please remember to subscribe to and like to our YouTube and Twitch pages, and then of course you can follow me at Nick Juskewycz on Twitter and Daily Fantasy Winners on Twitter at DFantasyWinners. All right, good luck everyone.